This screencast supports this lesson, which comes from Cutting Edge Upper Intermediate, and that is by Sarah Cunningham and Peter Moore, and it's published by Pearson. And I'm going to tell you how to do this as 2 40 or 45-minute lessons. So we're going to make some changes as we go through. The main focus is going to be on vocabulary and on speaking. Okay, so we're going to start off with setting up the topic and looking at some vocabulary in the first part of the lesson. So here's the first part of the lesson. We are going to make a few changes to make it into a 40 or 45-minute lesson. You could start off with some kind of lead-in about space, get students to name planets perhaps, a few questions on a slide. Would you like to go into space? Is there a space program in your country? Things like that. And then I think show them this picture, all right, and then get them to do exercise 1. Look at the photo. And they spent 18 months alone together in a space capsule and discussed the questions. What do you think it was like? Biggest problems? Do you think you could cope with this situation? Okay. Breakout rooms or together, using the chat, however you want to organise it. We're simply raising ideas and background knowledge at this point. Then we would go into the listening, but if we're trying to make this lesson a little bit shorter, I would suggest we don't do the listening and instead take the 4 questions that are here, all right, look at the audio script, which you also have in your materials, and create a slide that has these 4 questions and 4 answers as well, and then get the students to read and match them together. It's not a very heavy reading task, so we want them to read quickly, but we are trying to get them to understand the context of what happened to these guys, okay? And then we're moving from number 4 to looking at the adjectives in 4A, okay? So you can make a link at the end of section 2 by saying, right, yes, what personality traits do astronauts need? And of course, there's the answer that you've got from the audio script. And then you can say, right, now we're going to go on and look at more personality traits. So here is the key target language of this part of the lesson. So we're looking at adjectives and phrases to describe personal characteristics. The task asks the students to divide them into whether they would be an advantage, a disadvantage, or both. So looking at the task, I would suggest that the aim of that is to act as a diagnostic, to test, do they know these adjectives? Because if they can divide them into those 3 categories, then they may well have an idea of what they mean. However, I've used this activity myself and I find that students can often divide them into categories and yet still not really know what they mean. So I think we need to do more work than that. So I suggest staging this. Stage 1. Choose 6 or 7 of these adjectives that you think are the most difficult and create a different task. What we need is context. So I would suggest making sentences about linked to each of those 6 or 7 adjectives. So for example, if I choose arrogant, I think that's quite a tricky one. I would make a sentence that says, John, I work with John in the office. He's so arrogant. He thinks everyone should listen to his opinions. I don't like working with him. Yeah, so there's a context there that shows that an arrogant person thinks they're important and that people should listen to them, and that it's negative. I don't like working with him. Okay, so the context is showing the meaning of the word. So I want 7 sentences like that, 6 or 7 sentences. And then on the other side of the slide, definitions. Okay, so for arrogant, it might be thinking that you are more important than other people or something like that. So keep those definitions simple, because because if I look at a dictionary definition, it says exaggerating or disposed to exaggerate one's own worth or importance, which is too complex. So keep the definitions simple. Use a learner dictionary. You might find a simpler definition. So create that task first. Ask the students to match the sentence, the word in the sentence to the definition. So highlight those adjectives in the sentences. Then check the answers. Check meaning. You're going to need some serious concept checking here, okay? So thinking about arrogant. Is it someone who thinks that they're very important? Yes. Should they think they're that important? No, probably not. Is it a positive or a negative adjective? Negative. Something along those lines, okay? But really think through your concept checking questions. Also needing to deal with form, which might mean how we use that in a sentence. So I can't see any that might particularly need dependent prepositions. So being clear with the students that they are adjectives. Obviously pronunciation is going to need some work, highlighting the main stresses and drilling, perhaps in short sentences. He's resilient. She's extrovert. Should that be extroverted for the adjective and extrovert for the noun? I think that needs checking as well. That's just occurred to me as I'm looking at it. So a lot of work to be done, analysing this Lexis before you even start making your activities. Okay, think about meaning, think about form, think about pronunciation, and then if you think, gosh, there's just far too many words here, take some out, all right, and reduce the task. So once you've looked at 6 or 7 words individually, then you could give them this task to divide them into advantage, disadvantage, or both. They'll be better able to do it because they will have a more in-depth knowledge of the ones that you consider to be the most difficult. Okay. And then you can move on to B, working groups, compare answers. Which other qualities do you think would be important on a mission like this? Okay, and that will lead us very nicely into the second part of the lesson. And here we are in the second part of the lesson. So we've got a task here that moves from reading into speaking and then writing. We are going to be focusing on the speaking part and using this useful language, but we do need to do a little bit of work on the reading because it sets up the speaking. Again, like the listening in the previous stage, I think this needs to be shortened. So tell the students they're going to read about a new mission for 2050. Give them this reading text, but I'd like you to simplify it, please. Simplify it, shorten it, and produce a simple reading task, maybe 3 true or false questions, something like that. Quickly read, answer the true or false questions, peer check and check together. Try and get them excited about the mission and tell them, you're going to go on the mission. What do you think? Is it going to be exciting? And then introduce them to all the people that might come on the mission. So show these people on the slide and say, here's some people that you can choose from to go on the mission with you. You can choose 5 people. All right, so I want you to choose 5 people. So get them, each individual, to choose 5 people. Give them 5 minutes for this. I've got quite a lot of information to read. And some of those adjectives and phrases from section 1 come up in this part as well. So if in section 1 you've decided to remove some of the adjectives, I want you to check if they're in the second part and make sure the teacher knows that you've taken them out because they may need to modify their own material. All right, liaise. So they've chosen 5, and then you can focus them on these phrases here in A and B before they go into breakout rooms to discuss their choices. All right. I don't think there should be anything too problematic about using these phrases, but we'd like them to use them to expand their lexicon, to give them some new phrases to use. So I think it needs demonstrating first. So they've chosen their 5 people, come back together and say, right, now I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. You've chosen 5 people. In your breakout room, there'll be 3 or 4 students. So I want you to talk together and agree on 5 people that you think would be good to take. All right. And while you're doing that, I want you to use these phrases: explaining your choices and persuading and dissuading. So show these and then say, ask a strong student, tell me one of your choices, Amir. And Amir will say which one he's chosen. You can say, right, let's try to use some of the phrases together. So I think Amir is suitable because blah, blah, blah. What about someone you didn't choose, Amir? Oh, yeah, Giorgio. Okay, so he is too, what do you think? Oh, old? Yes. Oh, God, he's only 55. So demonstrating how to use some of these phrases together. And then you can say, right, so you're going to the breakout rooms. Do you need to agree with each other? Yes, you need to talk to each other and agree on how many people? 5, that's right. Do I want you to use these phrases? Yes, good. So make sure you have a screenshot of the phrases and a screenshot of the people, and then you put them into the breakout rooms and monitor for errors and examples of good language use. You want to give them a decent amount of time in the breakout. This is a 10-minute task at least, I think. It's a good amount of talking, a good amount of using the phrases there. And you can be collecting errors and examples of good language use. Don't turn your camera on, don't get involved unless you go into the room and there's complete disarray, in which case you need to sort it out and then turn your camera back off and leave them to it. Then get them back into the room, main room. At this point, you could put these on the slide and say, which ones have you chosen in your room, Amir? Use these phrases or not, as you like. If you think this is a bit of a step too far in the timing, then just get them to explain in their own way which ones they have chosen. All right, hopefully there's been a lot of argument, a lot of laughing, and some good ideas as well. So focus on ideas first, and then focus on the examples of good language use and the errors that you found. Hopefully you've been able to make a Word document. And you can share that document with the students and say, right, these are some things that I heard. Some of these are correct. Some of them are not correct. Have a look. Which ones are correct? Which ones are not correct? Everybody decide. Let's do number 1 together, etc. And then you work through those errors as a focus on accuracy at the end of the Freer Speaking task. Yeah, it's a fun lesson, but I want you to pay attention to improving the students. They're pretty good anyway, so they could just walk in the class and do this task. So we're trying to add to their knowledge, and we're trying to add by pushing them with the vocabulary in part 1, expanding their lexicon, and pushing them with the way they express their ideas in part 2. Okay, that's it.